In every heartache, there's a hidden seed of strength. Join Portia Booker on The Grief Grantor as we journey through stories of resilience, finding gratitude in the echoes of grief. Together, we transform sorrow into strength, pain into purpose. Welcome to The Grief Grantor, where your healing journey begins.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Grief Grantor. I am your host, Portia Booker. And as always, these conversations, let me start off by anytime I watch my introduction, I'm literally ready to cry. Literally, I can just cry watching it because it's something that when I was growing up, watching different sitcoms and soap operas that had a very emotional opening, I could resonate with the emotions and the amount of work that goes into creating something so beautiful and so sentimental. So, really quick, you guys, I want to start off with something. And some of you guys know this story about my journey of losing both my parents, but I want to talk about a little story of my mom's transition. One of the things that I'm grateful for is during the day of my mom's transition that I had the opportunity to thank her. I had the opportunity to send her off on her next journey that most people, unfortunately, are too emotional driven to have been able to do this in the way that I did. On the day of my mom's transition, I remember getting the phone call like it was yesterday. And I remember as I was on the way to the hospital, I said a prayer to God. I said, God, if it's my mom's time to go, I surrender her back to you. But keep me one promise, just one. Let her go peacefully. And so as I got to the hospital, I make my way up to her room, and I was the one who made the phone call to all of my family, all of our friends, for them to come up and send my mom off to her next endeavor. And I'm grateful that everybody showed up in droves. You know, we got my mom to sing, we got her to laugh, we got her to dance, we got her to do everything. But one of the things that a lot of people may or may not know is the intimate conversation me and my mom had an hour before she transitioned. I heard a little voice in the back of my head tell me, Portia, record this because you're going to need it. And it took me a long time after my mom's transition to be able to listen to that. Number one, because of all the emotions that I was feeling post her transition. And also, I wasn't in a space to hear what she had to say all over again. But one of the things that my mom shared with me before she transitioned was mommy's job is done. Mommy's job is done. And little did I know what she meant by that was it's only the beginning for me of my new journey and my endeavors. So I say that to all of you who are tuning in. As we embark on this physical plane, we're going to encounter so many different people. We're going to have a time constriction with certain people in our journey. So I encourage each and every one of you to take advantage of the time that you have with your loved ones, with your friends, because they can be here today and gone tomorrow. But always remember that their love will cross borders just for you. Remember, it's just a transition. It's a transition for your transformation in the long run. So we're going to take a break right here on the Grief Grantor. And when we come back, we're going to be joined by an amazing woman who, what I love to say, found a new journey through becoming a stay-at-home mother, but also navigating the waves of grief that comes from motherhood. So we'll be right back here on the Grief Grantor.
Hi, I'm Kelly Melissa Reinhart, host of Make Mental Health Matter. Join me on Mondays at 11 a.m. and Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Mountain Standard Time on the Achieve TV network right here on E360 TV.
All right, everybody, welcome back right here. As I mentioned before, we took our quick break. I talked about the journey of my mom's transition and how I was able to preserve that part of her through our conversation before she transitioned, and the importance of really taking the time to be with people, letting them know how much you appreciate them, and also that they're still with us, just in a different form. So today we have the honor to be joined by an amazing woman who, like I mentioned, converted her grief from being a stay-at-home mom and all of the different emotions that can come from that, and found a way to create powerful women's circles. And as we all know, sometimes finding our tribe through series of grief can be a roller coaster in itself. So welcome to the stage our mama empowerment speaker, author, and coach, Miss Michelle DeKeyser. Michelle, how are you today?
I'm so excited to be here, Portia. Thanks so much for having me on here today.
Michelle, first and foremost, I gotta give, of course, a shout out to our mutual connect who connected us. I mean, first and foremost, when she connected us, I was really just like, oh my goodness, like, who's this other person being connected to me? Like, because I get so many messages sometimes on social media that I often question, like, okay, what does this person want? And this whole thing. But I'm like, wait a minute, hold the front door and let all the cats in. I'm like super grateful that we had a conversation. I got to learn more about your grief journey because this is something that's in alignment with what I just mentioned in the very first segment of the show.
Welcome to a sanctuary of healing at Energy Girl LLC, where Laurie Spivey's expertise in energy work transforms lives. Specializing in Reiki, reflexology, and Akashic record reading, Laurie is dedicated to guiding women on a path to wellness, helping them release trauma, stress, and lingering emotional wounds. Rediscover your balance, vitality, and inner peace. Embrace a journey that rejuvenates your physical, mental, and emotional well-being. Begin your transformative healing journey with Laurie Spivey at Energy Girl LLC. Visit energygirlllc.com to book your session and awaken to a new you.
Michelle, I can relate, some mornings, especially now that we are in the holiday season.
Right.
And it looks different for a lot of us who have experienced loss, transition in traditions, transition in the fact that some of our loved ones will not be physically present at the table, traditions that where we would play certain games during holidays or make certain baked goods. Like my aunt, God rest her soul, my aunt Joy, she used to make this caramel cake. Oh my God, it was so rich to the point that if you looked at it, you immediately got a diabetic diagnosis. Like, it was straight up.
Straight up, you're like Caramel City.
Literally, I mean, like, no pun intended. It was like piling onto you the minute that you looked at it. You could smell it in the whole entire house. So when we think about those traditions that have changed for many of us, it can imprison us, right? And as I mentioned in the beginning about my mom, I'm grateful that I have that voice recording of our last conversation, because I don't really know, honestly, how I would feel if I didn't have something that tangible and accessible to me.
Yeah, it does make a big difference when you have that memory in front of you. And I think also, though, and I'm so grateful that you do, but for those of you that may not, I mean, even as just writing down those stories so we can retell them and not forget them as clean as they're in our memories, to do the best I can to preserve wherever we are at. Even if you didn't have that voice recording, would have been like the next best thing would have been to like just put it down as soon as possible whenever you were ready. And sometimes that's also therapeutic in itself, is getting those words out and really like letting that person live in those pages.
Oh, 100%. And Michelle, it's funny you bring that up because I did that in a sense with my book, Finding Grace Within Grief, Her Transition, My Transformation. I really touched on the grief journey of my mom's transition and in a response to all the different people who were unintentionally what I call shoveling their grief onto
Yes.
me. And I wanted to find a different way, a different avenue to go on my grief journey and not fall, I guess you can call it, victim to the doom and the
Mm,
gloom that society tends to place on us when
yes.
we are in seasons of grief and transition. And so, Michelle, this leads right into our conversation. So you created this beautiful memory book in honor of your father who transitioned.
Yes.
Can you so generously walk us through the process of gathering these letters, these photos from your family and friends, and how did this creative endeavor or outlet help you cope with the anticipation of your father's transition?
Well, for me, I'll just back up a little bit with my father, is that he had pancreatic cancer, and he first discovered it, but was able to get the Whipple surgery and everything. That was 4 years prior. And so, but then all of a sudden it was May or June of 2020 that he just was like, it's back. And he then passed by September. So it was a brief window from when like it reinvigorated, that it was just like, just this whole. And so knowing, I mean, I didn't know the exact date at the time, but knowing that this was a lot more aggressive this time around, and that there wasn't much that it could do. He was still doing some radiation and some treatment, but nothing was seeming to help. I was like, what can I do to help preserve this? And so I don't even know where exactly the idea came from, but I created a Google form. I just went on to Google, created a form, and I brought it up right here. So it's on my screen above, so you'll see me looking up, but I'm just going to start by reading the questions that I just put on this form, and so people could answer. And so I put, I just obviously ask people for their name, their contact, but then I start asking, how did you know Paul? How would you describe him? Is there something that Paul taught you? What is your favorite story or memory of Paul? Do you have any funny stories that you would like to share with him? Are there any favorite stories you remember that he shared with you? Knowing that he was going to read this, I mean, I was trying to do this as quickly as possible to make sure there was still time for him to read it. Is there anything you want to say to him? And what are some of the things you had in common with him? And over the years, what were some of your favorite things to do with him? So again, I was just trying to prompt people. And some people used this and just simply answered it, and I turned it in a paragraph form for them. Other people completely ignored it and just sent a letter. I also put a spot for people to put their own pictures, because I was like, that saved me the trouble of first of all gathering pictures, but also finding pictures that I never saw before or didn't necessarily have copies, especially with Polaroids, or like, back in the day when we had, actual pictures and can't just be digital. So like it created that whole idea of people sharing the whole process, that it wasn't completely on me, but it was still a lot of work to all put together. But so then what I ended up doing was creating a book called Celebrate Life. And so it's more about a celebration of who he was rather than this is the end. And so inside, you can see that we just start with the pictures of like, we love you. But then everyone, we have pictures, but then everyone has like their own section. And so you can see the wording, and then like here, even mine, and depending on how many people want to write or how they want to do it. And then I put, these are even my kids all together on Grandpa's page. They're a little bit to Grandpa. And then we would just go through and you just see all the memories. And then you get to certain families. I just put their family. And then they had some people share a story or a bit. And again, a lot of people were just filling out the form. Other people just sent letters. And then even one of his cousins sent like a 3-page letter. So my mom even read that one and was just like, I didn't even know she felt that way or like knew all those stories before. And so my mom periodically, since my dad's passed, I feel like every couple months or something, will just say how much she loves this book as a memory to him and something that she can come back to when she needs to just read something about him. And then he loved horse racing. So he partially owned some of the horses, and they ran at San Anita a lot. And so this was, of course, the back cover because that was like one of his biggest passions. And so we have the co-owner who was in here as well, and just different people we gathered. And I mean, some people I thought might participate, didn't never got around to it. But again, because of the nature of how quick this was happening and how I saw it, I put a deadline on the creation of this just because I want to make it get out before he passed away. So I'm not really sure how much he saw the actual physical copy of it, but he was able to see the PDF that I created into a book, because it was at that point easier for him to look at a computer screen than to hold something. So I know he did get it go through and read everything. And I know at least he got a chance to like take it in a little bit before he had passed, because I believe it was done in August. So he still had a little bit more time, and he kind of went through it a little bit. And even when we drove out, because it was during the midst of COVID. So we live in Wisconsin. They were living in the Seattle area. So all the five of us drove out there with the kids, because I didn't know any other way for my kids to say goodbye to him. We didn't really feel like dealing with planes and stuff at the time. And so even when we were there, like I was able to share some of it with him and stuff. And when I flew back, he called us back in September, my sister and I, and I actually kind of felt like I had said goodbye in August, because I wasn't sure with COVID how it worked. But if he wanted us back, as soon as he called back, my sister and I, we went, and he passed the week that we were there. But I was able to like kind of show him the book, kind of go through some of it with him, and parts of it that he could see it, and just know that he knew the effort was put into it and he could feel it. And I thought that was just such a different way than always after the fact, like who gets to hear their own funeral. So it's like being able to, and it doesn't necessarily have to be because, they're dying. It could be someone who's older, just having an 80th birthday or whatever. You want to celebrate that person's life. It's just a different way of doing it. But really it's an eye opener to how others think about that person. And so it is a great idea to have that memory and those ideas. So it was a simple project in terms of like getting the word out there, but then kind of collecting and just keeping track of it and putting a date on it. And so like a birthday would be a great, or an anniversary, wedding anniversary or something like that, where you could put a cap on it so that you get all the information, because people will dilly-dally till you put that deadline on them. So again, I put the deadline because I just want to make sure it was in his hands before he had passed. And so I was able to do that. And so now it is our memory to share. And of course, I sent the PDF to anyone who'd participated in it. So everyone got a copy of the PDF and a link if they want to order their own copy. I mean, I just did it through, I can't remember which, it wasn't Shutterfly, but it was one of those where you just order your books for, and I just did it through them and gave a link if anyone wanted their own copy. But I did provide the PDF version that I'd made to everyone so that everyone could read it as well. And I think it was just a great way to celebrate him in a way, especially during COVID, when we couldn't have a big funeral or things like that, for his memory to be preserved in a way, and making sure that people knew who he was. And that was the most important thing to me. And it helped with my process that I have that to come back to. And honestly, I will admit, I don't read it very often, but every once in a while, his birthday or something, I will. And it's just the fact that I have it and know that I have it. It's kind of like a release for me.
Michelle, first and foremost, thanks for being so generous with sharing that. Because as you mentioned, it's a celebration, right? It's a celebration of their life here, all the people that they've impacted. Like what you mentioned about one of his cousins. You didn't know all these stories that they had together, right? And Michelle, I'm curious, what's the memory that you have with your dad that's always etched in your heart?
He was actually a really quiet, reserved kind of guy. And it's ironic because he would always tell me, like my grandfather was in World War II, and he always would say, go ask him like his war stories. And he always willing to talk about it. But my dad was in the Vietnam War, never willing to talk about any of it. But I do remember when I was actually going to New York University, and he came out for the summer for a trip, and we took a 10-day trip just driving down the East Coast together. And we ended up in Washington, D.C. And it was August in Washington, D.C. So we're talking hundreds, like humidity, just ugly. And he refused to get a cab or anything. So we're like walking from the hotel miles downtown in the heat. Normally I wouldn't care about the walk, but it was just so hot. But we finally made it to the other side, and we got to the Vietnam Memorial. And for the first time, I just kind of saw the emotion that is inside of him, and saw who he is in a way that like he was afraid to ever show. But he was always the rock, the stability, the person that he was glue for the four of us. And with him passing, and things have changed since then. So I could really feel that in him. And I really cherish his generosity. He was always the one who, like, if there was another table of soldiers, or he could tell, he would pay for their bill without them knowing, or things like that, in terms of, like, he was just always so generous. And that's the person that I remember. He was very reserved, but like, to us or whatever, but I cherish those memories where I did get to see that side of him.
He was the unsung hero.
Yes.
Literally, the ones that you hear about on TV, where, you know, the person who can't pay for their groceries, and they, you know, they're starting to put things away, and the cashier's like, oh, it's been paid for, type of thing.
Yeah.
You know, and the fact that, first of all, Michelle, that you were able to see this, right? Because there tends to be a, what I call, contradiction, where people think that because of the way you were raised, or because of your career, that you're supposed to be the Tin Man stuck in this image, but there's more to you.
Yes.
And that's why I think this celebration of life that you did for your father really shows that as humans, there's so much that we don't know, and that we need to take more time to really unpack or peel back the onion layer, to really learn who people are, and not judge a book, no pun intended, by its cover.
No, exactly. Well, it's so true though, because I mean, honestly, that's why with women's circles and everything, is really learning how to truly listen deeply to each other. It's such a different sense. And it actually is a great skill in terms of how we relate to our kids as well. Because a lot of times we're so jumping in to fix it with our kids rather than listening to what they really need or want. And our goal as parents is to like be that guide for them, not to give them the skills. So because they are going to be on their own before we know it. I was looking, my son's about to turn 13, and I'm like, 2.5 years till he's able to get a driving permit. I'm like, that is not. I said that to my husband this morning, and he was like, and we were talking about whether we get my daughter a cell phone who's going to middle school. And I was just like, we've held off as long as we can, and these things keep growing. So we need to be that space that they come to chat to, but then we're not solving for them because they need to solve for themselves. And I think in celebrating that and really realizing that there are so many multi-dynamics to everyone, that we aren't just one thing. And we do judge a book by its cover so much and say, oh, well, they believe this one thing, so I can't talk to them. And we close our doors to a lot of people because we're unwilling to listen to their humanness. We all make mistakes. We're all there doing our thing. And it's okay, like, oh, well, I made a mistake. This is the way I was feeling today. But we're not a lot of times willing to give the person in front of us that benefit of the doubt. The person just cut you off. You're like, the words have come out of my mouth as well when that person cuts you off. I mean, but just think about, they're like over there, they could not have realized it. They could be in a hurry to get to work, whatever it is. That's their story right now. And we all of a sudden make it for them. And we're sometimes just unwilling to listen to each other. And so I think the more that we spend the time to see the multifacets of the closest people to us, it kind of expands us to realize that everyone around us has that same dynamic. And it just opens our heart to the possibilities, instead of saying it's me, it's the people I know, and that's it. But we all want to be loved. We all want to be part of something. And the more we open up, then we're all part of this humanness together rather than separate.
Oh, everything is connected. It's all the circle of life, or what I like to call it, the circle of connectivity. Your dreams to mine, and vice versa. So we're going to take a quick break right here on the Grief Grantor, everybody. We're going to continue our conversation with Michelle when we come back from the break. Right, everybody, welcome back right here on the Grief Grantor. We are joined by Michelle DeKeyser, and we were just continuing our conversation about how she was able to preserve so much of her father in this amazing memory book. Michelle, can you show it to our audience again? Because I just think that's so cool, like how you designed it, the pictures, the letters.
I didn't do the back. Yeah, so this was that was my sister's wedding day, and then just the different people. And then, so I got just so many different pictures that I would never have seen. And so here's that long letter from the cousin I was telling you about. It was like 3 pages. And just, I mean, we had a play group, so I was able to categorize them by, so I kind of just picked groups of people and just categorized it by, and it seemed to, you know, it all just came together. It all fit into one place. And it was just, and yeah, it just kind of ends. And then here's the horse owners with them together, and end the book with the horses. And it's just trying to celebrate the things that he enjoyed most. But like, I learned so much more about him and was able to like have a short conversation with him. He still was, by the time it came out, he did struggle to have those conversations and stuff, but I knew he knew it was there. And so it was such a different feeling about it, because being able to do that for him, but for me as well, because for those of us that were left, we had these memories and these ideas that wouldn't have been there. And I just learned so much because he was so reserved, but just, you saw the generosity just flowed off the pages that I was talking about, and just really brought that to life. And I could really hold on to that's who he was.
Michelle, that's like an oxymoronic term, right? It's in people's silence where you learn the most, in comparison to when they're talking, you tend to not learn a ton because you're so fixated. But it's in somebody's silence where you really truly learn so much about their essence, about their way of viewing the world, about their way of going about the world. Michelle, I'm curious, doing this project, preserving your father's legacy in this amazing book. I mean, this is just pure genius, right? How you were innovative in going about celebrating his life. How has this project, number one, contributed to your healing process? And what message do you think it conveys about the power of love and resemblance in love? Yeah, love and remembrance. Sorry, not resemblance. Love and remembrance in facing loss.
Well, I think it just comes down to how do you think you're going to want to remember the person? And for me, I was struggling knowing that this was inevitable because it was a relapse. I didn't get to see him as much as I wanted to. We ended up moving to Wisconsin. He was in the Seattle area, so we saw him periodically. And again, like I said, he was reserved, and so it was always depending. But I wanted to make sure I did have a better grasp of who he was, and so I think this project allowed for that in terms of just the emails and the connections it made. And even when he did pass, everyone was already on that chain from creating this, that you know, you got different messages after as well, because this was created and people got to experience that. And I think a lot of people were able to see him also in a different light by reading the whole thing. So I kind of just wanted to honor his memory, because he was kind of quiet and reserved, and he was so pig-headed at times as well. And he was the kind of person who, if you asked for something and he didn't want you to do it, he would just say no in a roundabout way. For instance, my husband and I took a year off travel around the world, and I wanted him to pay for my student loans for the year, just to take one thing off my plate. He was like, he didn't want us to go on this trip. He just thought it was a bad idea. And so he just said no. I'm like, okay, well, it's not going to stop me. That's fine. But in the end, we ended up getting married along the way. He paid for the wedding. He gave us a credit card if you need it for emergencies, and he told us we could spend a certain amount a month. Like, once he realized we were still going to do it, he then found his own way to give to it. But it was like, when I directly asked for something, it was always a no. And then all of a sudden it would be like, but what he would give would be so much bigger than what I even asked. And so, but it was always hard to like disseminate that. So I think coming and seeing him in these pages, though, like, just brought to life how truly generous he was, all about. And that's what I hold on to and try to preserve that for my kids as well. And when my kids are older, I love to be able to share this more with them as well, and even remind them of what they wrote when they were little to him before he passed. And I think it'll just be something that we can pass down then. And I do regret my brother-in-law passed recently, and I did not do this for him. It was just it was a little bit different. He was suffering from brain cancer and just struggling to understand exactly what was going on in him. He did know, and I thought about doing it, but in my time, I wasn't in the place to just put as much as I did into that. But at the same time, his mom and dad, we did different things. But so I think it's just choosing at that moment how you need to for that person. But again, this book or this idea could also then just be a birthday present. Like it doesn't have to be like as I was saying, a birthday or an anniversary, 50th anniversary present, an 80th birthday present. This could be something different. Doesn't necessarily have to be because someone's dying. I just love the idea of celebrating their lives and bringing that around. The other thing my mom used to do is card showers for people's birthdays. So she would send letters to for big 30th birthdays or whatever, the big ones. She would just send letters to everyone asking them to send a note or a card to the person. And so you just get a whole bunch of cards and notes for your birthday. So that was really, I always feel I've always felt for me, hearing people's words are more important sometimes than the gift, and just knowing how others feel about you. And just those words mean sometimes a lot more because of the things that she did. And so that's where I passed it on to create this.
I love that, Michelle, because I think we get so fixated on, again, the parallel, right? Where we have to only do this for a celebration of life situation, but you've already depicted that this could be a wedding anniversary gift, a birthday celebration. I mean, heck, even my brain is thinking starting a new job, like becoming an entrepreneur, right? Like showing where this person started, right? Maybe they started as just the cashier at the grocery store. Then maybe they moved up to a management position at the same place. Then maybe a couple years down the line, they pivoted to becoming a zookeeper or something, and now they're their own, exotic animal holder, lover, whatever. So I think
you're right. Maybe it's like a mom giving it to her 30-year-old kid and how they've grown through their life in a different way. Like instead of just a picture book, but a storybook of their life.
Yeah. Or because Michelle, when we'll pivot right into this, right? You've got the mom circles, right? That you've created through your own grief journey. Maybe even this could be a way for mom circles to come together and obviously share collective stories about what they've learned throughout their journey of motherhood, whether they've had, just strictly daughters, sons, maybe just lessons, and that they can pass on to other moms about dealing with the teenage years. I'm sure that
I mean, I think the biggest key is that we just close our mouth sometimes and just start to listen more and to record that a little bit. Because sometimes even the person talking doesn't necessarily believe their own words or feel that power inside of them. And so this is a way for us to document and encourage each other to be who we are. And the more that we stop saying that you have to do something a certain way and try to fix it for other people. But it's really a true way to start. Actually, that's with the circles. It's really about the listening, that we're not there to comment on it. We're simply there because there's two ways to get those thoughts out of your heads. I mean, when you're in self-doubt or you're not sure about your next path or whatever it is, there's two ways really. On paper, so you can see it in front of you, big and bold, like you get those thoughts out of your head, or you are seen and witnessed by another human being. And so those are usually your two choices, because otherwise those thoughts just circle in your head. And so those are the two best ways. You're in a journal, share that. However, you getting it on paper, just even for yourself, even burning it, just releasing it somehow from your mind. But then the witnessing it. But at the same time with witnessing it, we want to make sure that we are being vulnerable and we don't want to be cut off. We don't want to and it comes back to the power of the silence, because just because someone stops talking for a second does not mean that you're supposed to jump in right that second. There is such power in the silence, especially with your kids, that when they're done talking, just purse your lips together, sit there for another minute or two. The silence will bother them that they might start talking more. And so you keep processing because they're still processing. So the more that you're just there to, when you can, again, don't do these kind of conversations if you are in a hurry or you can't give them their full undivided attention. Make sure that you're in a space where you can just be there and be present with them and let them talk and write out the silences, or ask them another question instead of instead of trying to fix it or solve it or restate what they've said. And again, this is when we get truly listening. And so ideas like this of the book and celebrating people and saying all this helps us get those ideas out. So we really do learn about the people rather than the stories we tell ourselves about that person. We want to truly listen to what is their story. What are they going through? So then we become more sympathetic and we can empathize better. And we are just more compassionate people. And we are truly listening to each other because we are all in this human experience together. We're all going to make mistakes and we're going to succeed when we support each other.
Michelle, let me ask this. Considering you're holding these women's circles, right? Which do you find as far as them processing their thoughts, their feelings as you're listening, right? Do you find that writing down helps better or voicing it for you?
Well, that's an ironic question for me because I actually make them do both. Because a lot of times when I run the circle, I will do a meditation or some sort of prompt and give them a chance to get some of those thoughts on paper first. Then we do our group share. So I kind of do a mismatch between both because I think they're both vital. And some people may choose not to write it at that point. And some people may choose not to share. Like no one's required to speak. Like you can pass depending on your state. So these are all just optional things. The thing that I recommend is making sure you're finding a place where you feel safe to be vulnerable. That's the important aspect because I've been at many women's circles or groups, well, not necessarily circles, but more groups or ideas where you're a book club or this, and it ends up being just a complaint fest. And I feel if I don't have a complaint to come to the table, then I can't really share. But that is not women's circle. And women's circle is not therapy. It's not about fixing. It's about being present and really truly listening to each other so that you are witnessed and have that, because the energy, when you have that safe space and that energy, your heart actually talks, not your head. And it's a different processing theory. So that you get I've been to circles where they don't do the writing part, but I always give it a minute or two at least to get some thoughts on paper for people who process that way, then share. I find that helps some people. So that's the way I run it. But it is again about the processing and making sure that we are not speaking from here, but we're speaking from here. And coming in a group of women that are supportive allows for that to happen. And that's not always the case. So you are wanting to find that space where you do feel safe. And that's why it's always good to try them out. It's not like anything set in stone. Find the spot the space, the people, things that work for you. Again, there is no one right. That's why some people write better. Some people speak better. Some need both. Like there's different options because we all process things differently. Thing is to try them and see what flows for you.
Michelle, I love how you reiterated the space of safety, right? Because I think, and let's be realistic, there's a grief that comes with not feeling safe, not feeling heard in circles, in communities. And so, Michelle, for our audience who's tuning in, for other mamas like you who are seeking that women's circle, how can they, in a sense, embark with an open mind and not hold on to the shame and guilt as far as the other circles that they've maybe been a part of that did not vibe with them?
Well, I think that also comes back to this idea of the sisterhood wound. We as women have been scarred by other women, whether it was catty kids in elementary school, the mean girls in high school, wherever your path was. It's highly unlikely that if you're at this age, you haven't been scarred at some point by some other girl, woman, boss women, because a lot of women don't like boss women. They'd rather work for a man. It's easier. It's been said, all those concepts, right? So then all of a sudden, like, well, men are just easier to deal with. I'm not even going to deal with women, right? So a lot of that stems from those notions and things floating around that we've heard, that we've experienced, and all that. And even if you do try to connect with people who are like, oh, all of a sudden, like, oh, you need to do it this way, that's going to work better. Like you were doing it wrong. I'm sure many of you have been told that as well. That's where circle comes in because it's not like that at all. It is simply about, there is no crosstalk. There's circle principles for that matter. There's no crosstalk. There's no saying, oh, here's the advice for you. It is simply a place to be witnessed in a safe space. And I've been to many different circles, and they might structure differently, but they hold those principles of how to communicate more effectively. We were joking on one of my podcasts last week of, what if Congress sat in circle? How different would those conversations be? Because it's not all of a sudden when you're in circle, there's no, I'm a facilitator. I'm not your leader. Everyone sitting in this room is a leader. Everyone has the thoughts or process for their own lives, what's happening, how they should react. However, from the masculine point of view, we have someone in front of the classroom, we have the expert, we have someone we need to put on a pedestal and say, we need to follow whatever they're saying, process it by yourselves, and then go off and figure out how to do it. Circle is about an idea, present it, and then each of us learning from the shares happening, as well as our own shares, because we're now speaking from our heart, which is a completely different processing mechanism. Then you have something to take with you from the processing already, because you were able to process in the circle itself, versus just having new information put at you. Because remember, information, knowledge, whatever, it's potential till you take action with it. So if you're not doing something different, whereas when you're learning circle principles, you're now learning how to listen more closely. You're going to listen to your kids in a different way. You're going to respond to your kids in a different way because of how your body is doing these processes in this experience. Because circle is an experience. It's not just, let me go listen to a lecture. This is to come participate. But again, I like the word participate, but show up as you are. Even right now, I was telling Portia as we got on, I'm like, I wasn't camera ready today. I don't quite feel I couldn't get my lighting right. My hair is not exactly straight. I didn't put makeup on today. And actually, I hardly ever wear makeup, but that's my principle. But that's my principle, is like, show up as you are, because your message is more important. Your learning, your processing is more important than the way you look. Because when you need to show up and you need to do those things, it's your energy that matters, not necessarily the way you look. People feed off of the energy that you are changing and creating, and circle helps process and change that energy with your participation, with your sharing from the heart.
And Michelle, I appreciate, again, just the transparency, right? I think there tends to, in a lot of different societies, especially ours, that there can't be transparency. Everything has to have a certain image. It has to be dolled up to perfection. What I like to call the TV, the news special is what I love to call it.
Or Facebook ready, right? Everything's Facebook perfect.
Or camera ready was the phrase that I always heard when I was in TV. And I'm glad that you reiterated that it's about the message, right? Being a participant and shifting our mindset from a space of, well, I have to sit and listen. No, I get to participate. I get to be heard. So it's all about reframing and redirecting our thoughts from this space of low energy to a space of, I'm a leader. I'm a leader in connection with other leaders. So let's make this work. Let's bring about change with our own expertise and sharing in a safe space where I can be myself. I can show up with one nail missing, so like, so I appreciate, Michelle, that you reiterated that for our audience. So we're going to take another quick break right here on the Grief Grantor, everybody. When we come back, we're going to finish the conversation with Michelle.
Hi, this is Ken D. Foster, the host of the Voices of Courage show. Join us live on Wednesdays at 11 a.m. Pacific, where we help you see the unseeable, know the unknowable, and do the impossible on E360 TV.
All right, everybody, welcome back right here on the Grief Grantor. Michelle, I extend my gratitude to you for coming on and sharing so much with our audience today. If one of our listeners was interested in connecting with you, tuning into your podcast, and following your journey, is there a website or social media handle you can share with us today?
Well, everything is linked on connectingmamas.com, which is the website here. The podcast is Mama Genius Hub, which is on Apple, Spotify, everywhere. But all the links, there's all the sections are on the website itself, all my digital courses that I have available right now, everything. And there's even a spot now for which I just got activated last week, that if you want Women's Circles information on the ones that are upcoming, we have one coming up December 3rd. I'm not sure when this is airing, but there's a spot for you just to put in your email and just get notifications of when the free ones are arising. And again, it's what I'm all about is let's start connecting together. And it's really in realizing the true deep parts of connection that we can really start to become who we are. Because once we start realizing that we have the support of other women, that we don't have that sisterhood wound with other women, like it's not always has to be that way, that we can actually support each other, that there's power in that, which lifts us up. And again, it's really about the tides rising, because we're at a pinnacle point in history. The Dalai Lama even called it out in 2009, where he said the Western woman's going to change the world. And the way we change it is, as Dr. Shinoda Bolen, who has been on stage with him, interpreted it through these circles. She called it the Million Circle that she wrote about. And I had the privilege of meeting her last August and being part of the World Religion Parliament, where I just met all these circle leaders and just seeing the floor that had, and it was only in 2015 that women even got programming at this World Religion Parliament. So 2015 was the first year it started. So already when I went last year, we had an entire floor. And the power that was just exuding from this floor is like, I want to bring that to the rest of the world, that when we as women start to dive into our power together and rise up, it's us supporting each other, and the economics of it is getting the purchasing power and becoming those CEOs and becoming the women where we support each other. Because honestly, I see the women at the top who are making scholarships, who are helping smaller businesses, who are doing those things. Those are the women I want to keep bringing up and creating this shift that the Dalai Lama is speaking of, is that when we get this purchasing power thinking that we're not worthy enough, but we actually realize that we are, which I'm struggling with at the moment, but I'm out here with true transparency, as Portia was saying, is it is about that though. It is not just let's do this all for free. Let's support each other and claim the purchasing power, which money does talk here, but it's how we use the money. It's not that we become successful that we're just going to like buy all these things and hoard it, which I've seen a lot of men do. And I don't see all men doing it, but everyone thinks because some do it, that that's going to happen to them. No, this is about us raising each other up and then supporting more to rise up so we can create what the Dalai Lama said. And we do this through support, because we are collective beings, women, who need that connection. And again, that connection creates that power that allows us to speak from the heart. Because if you don't know the answer of what you truly want to do right now, how do you want to contribute back to society, but you feel that yearning inside of you, that's where this comes in, because it allows you to release some of the barriers society's put on you to figure out, what is that inside of me? Where is that coming from? What do I want to do? I went from November 12th was supposed to be a blog launch for me. I was going to launch the Mama Genius Hub blog. And it was on my birthday of October 25th. I got off the phone and I was just like, this doesn't feel right. Like I've been trying for a year to do this blog. It's like, again, and I'm talking about genius, being in your genius zone where you feel alive, where you're doing these things, right? That's what the genius zone is all about. Us figure out what that is. All of a sudden it was like, no, I've been saying I want to do a podcast. And so on November 12th, in 2 weeks, I went from a blog launch to a podcast launch. I learned how to upload them. I got a hosting site. I figured out what the heck RSS feed is, all this stuff in a 2-week period. Because it was the moth going towards a flame, I found the window. And so the Women's Circle helps you find those windows rather than keep going towards this flame and hitting your head against things. And so when we need to figure out what's in our hearts, this gives us that space and it makes it happen. I mean, we always talk about time. It makes it happen quicker because we have that support. And so that's what this is all about, is I want to get that. My goal right now is to get the idea, what is a Women's Circle is, how we can do that and make more of them, whether it's through me. It doesn't have to be through me, but if you're inspired by this, please do come over here. But if not, start looking at the circle principles and looking at, there are so many organizations out there on the podcast. already have 4 episodes with different circle leaders. There's so many ways for you to find that connection if this is speaking to you. My goal is to make the word women's circle a mainstream word that people know what they are and how to speak with them and learn how to process and communicate more effectively, more meaningfully, and more from the heart. So we are seeing the humanness in each one of us and living in the shared humanity together. That's the whole goal. And to make a better world for our kids. That's why I'm talking to all the mamas, because when I'm inspiring the mamas, the kids are coming right along with it. My kids are right along the process with me. We were able to be published authors together. So we're in compilation books together, both of my kids in 2 separate ones. And it's that process of bringing the genius out in each of us. It's hard not to inspire those that surround us, but we learn how to bring that out.
I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more, Michelle, because like you said, water trickles down, not up.
Yes.
So it starts from the ground in order for you to really create a ripple effect and a movement.
Yes.
Right. And I think, Michelle, to go back to what you mentioned about what the Dalai Lama said, we're in a season of elevation, right? Where we can create the change that we really desire to have. And to your point about wanting to launch the blog, I can't tell you, Michelle, how many times I'm like, oh, I want to launch this, I want to launch that. But then I get this in my spirit, like, no, this isn't what I really want to do. Like I had this experience about a month ago where I was in school to, get a new certification. Well, as I'm going through a little bit of the classwork, I said to myself, this doesn't align with me anymore. This doesn't align. And I withdrew. And, I waited 8 months to get into that class. But I said, no, it's not a part of my messaging anymore. It's incongruence, but I don't need this to define me anymore. I've already narrowed my focus.
Exactly.
And hence the show, the Grief Grantor, came to life.
And the one other thing I want to add on to that is that those of you that are listening to this and have that calling in the pit of your stomach, but keep pressing it down. And that calling is, I want more. And it is even the feminine mystique. And then she wrote it 60 years ago, exactly 60 years ago now. A whole bunch of housewives just having this depression and feeling of what now? And we've evolved since then. Now that we have a job and the home, it's still the now what with all this, right, to pull our hairs out because we're still not listening to that calling inside of us of that genius that is in each one of us. Are we actually doing the things that are aligned with us? Or are we still living in the zone of excellence? Things I'm good at, but still don't feel like I'm just in the busyness of it all. I mean, you think about that lawyer who is really good making all this money, but it doesn't feed their soul. That's the zone of excellence. We're talking about the zone of genius here and figuring out what that is. And if you don't know what it is, that's the whole point of the women's circles, is to help speak from the heart to figure that out. Because we've blocked it all out. We've knocked down our curiosity from being a kid when we were like excited about things. And that's what this is all, igniting that again, igniting that excitement, figuring it out. For me, figure out podcast versus blog. Like that's huge, like in terms. And so it's having those decisions, but the support as you make those decisions and realize where that's coming from. So we are living in our zone of genius. And that's what the Mama Genius Hub podcast is all about, is figuring out that genius in each one of us. And it is through connection for women, especially, how we figure it out. And that's the whole point, is genius comes from that circle and that opening up and releasing. And a lot of people I know are afraid to come to a circle, like the fear of it, like, what is it all about? And you have to come experience it. And it is on purpose. Connecting Mamas is doing them through virtually, because I learned my lesson. I went deep in and did an in-person circle and had all the things I thought I wanted, but my body wasn't ready for it. Traumatically, like I got the knots, and I just, every time I was in there, like I couldn't process. It was like almost jumping off the deep end of belonging into that deep end instead of going through the shallow end. So from my lessons, from my own experience, I create the shallow approach where we can ease into it and start to remove those barriers that we put on ourselves by living in our own little houses, driving our own little cars, no longer communicating and connecting with each other. So we can slowly remove it, less dramatically, but still more quickly and more efficiently than trying to go read a self-help book and go, yeah, I'm going to start doing that tomorrow. I'm going to start implementing that tomorrow.
Right. And how many more tomorrows have to go by before you actually take action?
Exactly. And so if you want to do the work and really dive into learning what is inside your heart, because it's a process. It's the onion peeling back, right? Because we have to peel off those layers that we've put on ourselves for all these years. Mm-hmm. All those times we've said no. As a mom, once we have those babies in our hands and we decide we can't do the things we used to do, we just start saying no. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but it does change who we are in terms of what those layers are. But that inside of us, who we really are, is still there. It's just, how do we uncover that now that we've put these layers on there? And the best, quickest, easiest, funnest way is with community and other women who are in the same spirit, in the same energy of wanting to do this also. Because I've been around the room of women who don't necessarily want to do that yet. That is tricky. And so if you are hearing the calling, you want to do something about it, that's the time to reach out and find a women's circle, whether it's Connecting Mamas, whether it's another one on the podcast or somewhere else. These are just ideas. They're also on the podcast, gives you lots of ideas of the circle principles and how to structure it, how to find yours. That's what I want to do, is I just want to create more of them, whether it's me personally or you listening, create your own. I don't care. I want more of them in the world to shift that energy and create the prophecy that Dalai Lama said.
Absolutely. Hey, everyone, just know that your vibe attracts your tribe, and there's always someone else out there that sees things the way that you do, and find them. And don't suppress that calling. If something keeps circling back to you, that calling to start the blog, write the book, honor it, because there's a reason why it keeps knocking at your door, for a reason. Well, everybody.
I'm sorry, Portia. Sorry.
Go ahead.
I have to throw one last thing in there, but because you said the book, and that's what Mama Genius Hub is all about, is bringing, like, for instance, I just had a self-publishing person on there. I want to bring the tips of, if you have that calling inside of you as a busy mom, I want to bring the practical ways of you to make that happen. And come find those episodes that speak to you to make those a practicality in the real life of a busy mom. Because about us getting those messages out there. I am so sorry for cutting you off, but thank you, everyone.
No, I appreciate that. I mean, because it's true, right? Like, there tends to be a lot of what I call, you slice off a piece of the butter, but then you've paid for the full, but only get a piece, right? And I think as moms, right, you've got kids, you've got work, you've got appointments, you've got all these other things. So sometimes it's hard for you to find a centralized hub that can meet you where you're at.
And this is exactly, it's geared towards busy. And again, I'm trying to redefine the word busy. We're working on that as well, but it is calling you out, because that's what this is about. Like, there's no more excuses. I'm trying to give you small 15-minute ways of whatever your genius is, making that a reality.
Absolutely. I appreciate that, Michelle. Well, everybody, that was Miss Michelle DeKeyser that you heard from. And that concludes this episode of the Grief Grantor. Thanks for tuning in, and until next week.
Thank you for joining us on the Grief Grantor. May the story shared today light your path and guide your heart toward healing. Remember, with every moment of grief, there's an opportunity for gratitude, resilience, and empowerment. Continue your journey with us online and share your own story, because in this tapestry of life, every thread matters, especially yours.